My Lords, I'd like to say a heartfelt thank you to the Noble Lords, Lord Young of Acton and Lord Hogan Howe, for leading on this. I think it's telling that the supporters who've signed the amendment are across party. I think that the very richness of such excellent speeches from across the House should be something that the government should take note of. There is widespread concern for all sorts of reasons, and action should be taken. I just feel a little bit cynical, because I feel as though I've celebrated the demise of non-crime hate incidents on quite a number of occasions in the past. When the Fair Cop founder Harry Miller in, I think, 2020 won his High Court challenge, the judge declared that non-crime hate incidents had a chilling effect and unlawfully infringed on Harry's freedom of speech. And I remember a lot of us thought that will be the end of that then. I then listened to a variety of Home Secretaries, quite a number in fact, who declared that there was a problem with non-crime hate incidents. And I thought, oh good, something will be done, because politicians do like to do something. But I am most reassured, genuinely, by the present Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who does seem to be absolutely determined to get to the bottom of this and to sort it out. And, you know, I think her emphasis that the police should focus on streets, not tweets, is quite good summation of where we are. However, despite that universal acknowledgement that the non-crime hate incidents are not fit for purpose in many ways, I'm afraid I worry that, like the Greek mythological Hydra, all these various attempts at cutting off the monstrous NCHI serpent's head, as soon as we do, another couple of heads grow instead. So I do think it's very important that we don't just sort of console ourselves with getting rid of the name, but also actually allowing the sentiment and the politics of it to remain. And as somebody who's spoken many times on this issue in this very House, often greeted by some eye-rolling, but also offered endless assurances that it was all being sorted by, not this government actually, by previous government, I now believe that assurances are not enough, and we do need to make this issue watertight. We need primary legislation as a guarantee that there will be no more non-crime hate incidents, and I do think a full deletion of the historic records held by the police. The Noble Lord Herbert made the point that when there's been changes in the criminal law, that records have not been deleted. But of course these aren't crimes and they should be deleted. It's also the case, by the way, that even if they're not used, the idea that the state's got a kind of file of hundreds of thousands of people with the word bigot across them, or hate criminal, even if they're not hate non-criminal, I mean, no, it's not right. They should be deleted. I also have a worry that the ideological premise of non-crime hate incidents remains undisturbed. Indeed, it's deeply embedded into the labyrinth of hate crime legislation that we discussed in committee last week. There is an acceptance that words, attitudes and beliefs that are interpreted as hate subjectively by the alleged victim or a third party and assumed to be motivated by hostility or prejudice towards protected characteristics, not proven but assumed, that outlook, I think, affects hate crime legislation, but it's been drummed into policing and it encourages criminal investigation into speech, and that's why free speech campaigners are not just concerned about non-crime hate incidents, but the whole concept of what constitutes hate in the law. And I'm afraid that those fears won't be allayed by the removal of non-crime hate incidents. One chorus presumption of non-crime hate incidents is that certain types of speech presage much worse, often violent incidents. Actually, this notion of escalation was used against the Noble Lord Moynihan amendments that I spoke on last week, as though the public are just one hateful word or opinion away from launching a racist pogrom and must be stopped by early intervention or recorded because, you know, if they've said that, they're bound to be the type of person or go and kick the hell out of someone. And I just think it's insulting, it's wrong, it's a misunderstanding of speech. And I don't think that kind of early warning notion that's incorporated into the potential intelligence of non-crime hate incidents amounts to much more than surveillance of society for no crimes. I also wanted to note that the muddle of discretion and subjectivity associated with what constitutes hate and associated with the promiscuous use of non-crime hate incidents has been very damaging to the credibility of criminal justice and the notion of it as non-partisan. Not least because of the way that non-crime hate incidents have been used by police in a particularly one-sided way. The Noble Lord Kempsell, I think, explained the different police forces, some zealots, some, normal. But that does appear to be, on the one hand, the reporting of these does appear to be driven by bad faith complainants using them to harass political opponents, as has been described in other speeches. But there is, I do think, the danger of seemingly some politicised police officers also joining in, kind of activist officers using NCHIs to punish wrongthink, the wrong kind of opinions with a knock on the door. There have been particularly grim examples of a kind of inconsistency. When we look at the publication of the dossier this last week of ignored anti-Semitic crimes or incidents against Jews in Birmingham, evidence supplied by a whistleblower. And just to use an example, that included an attack on a 12-year-old girl who was punched in the face, kicked in the stomach, with the other child assailant shouting "Free Palestine" at her. And the police email said, "No action required." No NCHI there, it would seem. Contrast that with the infamous case some years ago that I was involved in a little bit, in reporting it at least, of the 4 Year 10 students in Wakefield who had non-crime hate incidents logged against them after they kicked around a Quran in the playground and scuffed it. Their head teacher noted there was no malicious intent, the book remained intact, but the police responded to community concerns that were whipped up, and there was a kind of outcry. And you could see the weaponising then of non-crime hate incidents. And those children got non-crime hate incidents against them. So will the Minister comment on how such weaponisation of hate crime as a concept be rooted out, how police forces will avoid such preference for some subjective lived experiences of hate more than others? How can we deal with that? And I think that is a hangover from non-crime hate incidents. Finally, on record keeping, I'm concerned that the police's habit of record keeping in difficult circumstances, in NCHI circumstances, might continue, even if we don't know about it, behind the backs of scrutiny and accountability. So just to finish with this example, in September last year, Helen Joyce, the Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, after putting in a subject access request, discovered that she'd been added to a police national database as guilty of a crime without ever being charged, tried, convicted or even told. In her Substack, she detailed about finding out that she'd been considered in need of a non-crime hate incident related to tweets and statements referring to a trans-identifying individual who calls themselves Frida Wallace, and had described them as a fetishistic trans-identifying man, which she claimed was factually accurate. But the main thing is that without her knowledge behind the scenes, over a matter of time, and some arguments about whether it deserved an NCHI or not, instead what happened was that in her file it is written crime, harassment, motivated by transphobia because of misgendering, no action. Now that wasn't a non-crime hate incident, but it was generated in relation to a non-crime hate incident. And so can the Noble Lord the Minister assure us that the habit of recording non-crimes won't merely be replaced by the word crime, and the creation of a Orwellian shadow crime recording procedure with no due process won't replace getting rid of non-crime hate incidents? I want to see the back of them, but I fear the ideology that's informed them is well and truly alive and kicking, and I think that needs to be tackled too. Yeah.